Hey boys, it's HarmNone. Today, we're going to be going over the fastest planes in Grand Theft Auto Online in terms of top speed. Now, an interesting thing about planes and their top speeds in Grand Theft Auto Online is very similar to real life. There is a point where a plane will reach its high altitude top speed, and there's also a point where a plane will reach its low altitude top speed. Now, the low altitude top speed area is much smaller than the high altitude top speed area because obviously, well, the sky goes up quite far and the ground is, well, here. So anyway guys, I will give you the low altitude top speed of all of these planes as well as the high altitude top speed of all of these planes. Obviously, the faster the top speed, no matter high or low altitude, will result in the plane getting a better ranking in this list. And just one more thing before we get into this list, I want to say this list has been cross-checked. I have seen several different sources on the information about these planes, so this list should be 100% accurate. However, if you disagree, if you think you know something that I don't, which maybe you do, feel free to make a comment down below after you watch the video. Anyway guys, we're going to go ahead and start off with plane number 10. Of course, the first plane that we are going to be going over is the LF22 Starling. Now, the Starling is an interesting plane because it obviously has a rocket boost, so the amount of time that this thing is actually going to be at its top speed is a bit limited. Obviously, the plane is traveling at its fastest when its rocket boost is active, and when you're in a low altitude setting flying straight on with the boost active, the Starling will top out at 163 miles per hour. However, if you are at a high altitude setting like I am right now, as you guys can see, I am above the clouds, and you have the rocket boost running on the Starling, this thing will top out at 189 miles per hour. Now, the Starling goes for $2.75 million if you have the trade price unlocked, and if you do not have it, it goes for $3,650,000. So the Starling's pretty good. It's pretty good for dogfighting from what I hear. I'm not a personal super fan of the Starling, but I hear it is quite good. So that's it for number 10. Let's move on to number 9. Next up at number 9, we have the Seabreeze. Now, this thing goes for $850,000 if you have the trade price unlocked, and if you do not have the trade price, the Seabreeze goes for $1,125,000. Now, the Seabreeze has a relatively slow, low altitude top speed of 153 miles per hour. However, its high altitude top speed is 190 miles per hour, which is pretty darn quick. The Seabreeze is a fantastic plane. Of course, this is an amphibious plane. You can land this thing directly in the water and just take right back off. Very interesting. It's also armed with machine guns, obviously, so that is pretty cool. So that's it for the Seabreeze at number 9. Let's move on to number 8. Next up, we have the P996 Laser coming in at number 8. Now, this thing goes for $6.5 million, or of course you can steal it from the military base, and it has a low altitude top speed of 153 miles per hour, so not very fast. However, it does have a much faster high altitude top speed. When the Laser is in a high altitude setting, its top speed goes all the way up to 192 miles per hour, making this definitely one of the fastest planes in the entire game. On top of that, the Laser is also equipped with its famous autocannon, which is explosive and does tons and tons of damage. And of course, it has missiles and rockets as well. So the Laser is a pretty good plane, not one that I would necessarily recommend purchasing because it does cost quite a bit of money. However, it is a good plane. So that's it for number 8. Let's move on to number 7. Next up at number 7, we have the P45 Lakota or Lakota. Now, this thing goes for $2 million if you have the trade price unlocked, and $2.65 million if you do not have the trade price unlocked. Now, the Lakota is a really good plane in Grand Theft Auto Online, definitely one that I personally quite like. However, it's still not my favorite. This thing has a low altitude top speed of 157 miles per hour, so not exactly super fast, however not super slow either, still faster than most of the other planes we've gone over so far. However, when you get up to a higher altitude in the Lakota, its top speed does go up to a very respectable 198 miles per hour, making this the 7th fastest plane in the entire game in terms of top speed. The Lakota is pretty good. It is a little on the expensive side, especially considering its performance. However, it's not that bad. Still a plane that I'd say I do recommend. That's pretty much it for the Lakota. Let's move on to number 6. Next up at number 6, we have the Buckingham Howard NX-25. Now this is actually the fastest low altitude top speed plane in the entire game, topping out at 176 miles per hour, which is pretty darn fast, especially considering some of the other vehicles we've gone over recently that were topping out at like 157. The Howard NX25 is pretty quick in the low altitude area. When it comes to high altitude, the NX25 tops out at a whopping 200 miles per hour, which is pretty darn quick. Now this thing is one of the cheaper planes, going for 975k if you have the trade price unlocked, and 1.3 million if you do not have the trade price unlocked. So the Howard NX25 is definitely a pretty quick plane. It's not my favorite, however. I really don't like the handling of this plane in general, but it is still very fast nonetheless, so it's still a pretty good plane, I have to say. That's it for number 6 with the Howard NX25. Let's move on to number 5. Next up at number 5, we have the Alpha Z1. Now there is a pretty common misconception in Grand Theft Auto 5 that the Alpha Z1 is actually the fastest plane in the game. Now it is the second fastest low altitude top speed plane in the game. However, as far as high altitude goes, it is still not the fastest. It is the 5th fastest though, so that is no slouch. Now the Alpha Z1 does top out at 175 miles per hour in the low altitude top speed range, and in the high altitude top speed range it tops out at 201 miles per hour, so 1 mile per hour faster than the Howard NX25 and 1 mile per hour slower than the Howard NX25 in the low altitude range. So still, this thing is technically faster because it has a little tiny bit of a higher top speed. Now the Z1 is a little more expensive than the NX25, going for $1.6 million with the trade price and $2.1 million without the trade price. So a little more expensive, however, definitely in my opinion a much nicer plane to fly. I do like the handling of this plane a little bit better, so that is something to consider for sure. So that's it for number 5. Let's move on to number 4. Next up at number 4, we have the V65 Molotov. Now the Molotov is one of the more expensive planes on this list, going for $3.6 million with the trade price and $4.75 million without the trade price. So this thing is quite expensive. However, it is definitely a pretty fast plane. Now in the low altitude range, this thing tops out at 163 miles per hour, which is pretty darn quick for being in the low altitude range. However, in the high altitude range, the Molotov is a much quicker plane, topping out at 206 miles per hour, which is pretty damn quick. Now the Molotov is definitely a pretty nice plane in GTA Online. Definitely not my favorite one that I own, but still really cool looking. It is based off of a MiG-15 or a MiG-19, as I was told in the comments on my hangar tour the other day. So I now know that. Definitely a really cool plane. Unfortunately, it only has machine guns, but it does have missiles as well as rockets, which are pretty cool. So that is another advantage. Overall, the Molotov is definitely a plane that I would say that I recommend. However, that is only if you have a ton of extra money lying around, because if you don't, this thing is not going to be the best bang for your buck, that's for sure. Anyway guys, that's it for the Molotov at number 4. It's time to move on to number 3. Next up at number 3, we have the Mammoth Hydra. Now, this thing goes for $3 million if you have the trade price and $4 million if you do not have the trade price. The Hydra has one of the higher low altitude top speeds in Grand Theft Auto Online, coming in at 168 miles per hour, which is a pretty decent low altitude top speed considering that this thing is not the Alpha Z1 or the NX25. However, the real reason that the Hydra is on this list is because of its high altitude top speed, which is 207 miles per hour. So it's only 1 mile per hour faster than the Molotov, so not really that much faster. However, we are not done with the Hydra. We're going to come back to this thing in a few minutes. But for right now, this thing is at number 3. And with that being said, it's time to move on to number 2. Next up at number 2, we have the Rogue. Now the Rogue goes for $1.2 million if you have the trade price and $1.6 million if you do not have the trade price. On top of that, it is also a 2-seater aircraft, so that is a pretty handy feature to have. Now the Rogue is quite significantly faster than anything below this thing on the list. Its low altitude top speed is 174 miles per hour, so it's just off the pace of the Alpha Z1. So that is pretty good. However, its high altitude top speed is much higher. The Rogue at high altitude has a top speed of a whopping 216 miles per hour. So in terms of GTA 5, that is pretty darn fast. Compared to real life, not that great, but In GTA, 219 miles per hour is definitely no slouch. The Rogue is a super fast plane, and of course it is a two-seater like I mentioned, so you and a friend can move across the map very quickly with this plane. On top of that, it's also got dual explosive cannons, which are really good, and it also has access to homing missiles and non-homing missiles as well. Overall, the Rogue is one of the best planes as far as bang for your buck goes. This thing is pretty awesome. So that's it for the Rogue. It's time to move on to the fastest plane in Grand Theft Auto Online. The #1 fastest plane in Grand Theft Auto Online is of course the Buckingham Pyro. This thing is insanely quick when it comes to high altitude top speed. Now the Pyro is pretty quick at low altitude as well, coming in at 174 miles per hour, so it's tying up the Rogue actually, and it's getting very close to the Alpha Z1. However, where this thing really shines is at high altitude. At high altitude, the Pyro has a whopping 219 mile per hour top speed going flat, which is pretty goddamn insane. On top of that, it's also got machine guns, and it does of course have homing missiles and non-homing missiles as well. This plane is insanely quick, definitely the fastest plane in Grand Theft Auto Online. But of course, this is under one condition. See, the Pyro actually isn't the fastest top speed plane in Grand Theft Auto Online. Remember what I said about the Hydra and coming back to the Hydra? Well, it's time to do so. You see, there's something about the Hydra that I did not mention when I was talking about it a few minutes ago. The Hydra actually has a pretty crazy speed glitch that you can do in order to make this thing into what is actually the fastest plane in the entire game. Now, I kind of suck at doing this, but what I can tell you is that you need to be in hover mode within the Hydra. So get really high up in the air in the Hydra, because obviously we need the low resistance air as much as possible to help with this thing going as fast as possible. So we're way up in the air, we are in hover mode, we are not moving. What you're now going to do is you're going to go forward, and when you go forward, you're going to hit the S button on keyboard or go down on your left stick. Then you're going to go like this. You're basically going to rotate from having the nose up to having the nose down. Then you're going to go up again, then you're going to go down again. You're going to go up again, then you're going to go down again. And eventually you can get your plane moving at an extreme speed, as you guys can see I am doing right here. Now this will take some getting used to, it does take some practice, and it will not last forever. However, of course, when you get up to a speed that you like, you can of course switch into regular plane mode and fly at a pretty extreme speed. Now I'm not 100% sure what the Hydra's top speed is when you are doing the speed glitch, because of course it is a glitch. What I can tell you is it is faster than the Pyro, however I'm not sure to what degree it is faster. I know it is faster, I just don't know what speed you're actually going, unfortunately. So there you have it. Technically, the Pyro is the fastest top speed plane in the entire game. However, there is a speed glitch with the Hydra which will allow it to actually go faster than the Pyro. However, 9 times out of 10, the Pyro is going to be the faster plane, because setting up the speed glitch with the Hydra can be slightly annoying. If I was going to pick a plane, as far as top speed goes, I would definitely say to pick the Pyro. If not, pick the Hydra for sure. The Rogue is also a great plane as far as bang for your buck goes, so that is another one you guys should definitely look at if you're looking to get into planes in GTA Online. Anyway guys, that has been it for the top 10 fastest planes in Grand Theft Auto Online. If you guys enjoyed this video, a like is of course appreciated. Dislike if you didn't. Let me know in the comments down below what you thought of the video. Subscribe if you guys are new, and I will see you all in the next video. Until then, take care. Peace.